lucky enough to work for a company that produces a product that dramatically changes the quality of my life. Without therapy, I would be a complete wreck. So I thank ResMed and all the other innovators out there. Yeah, Paul and I have been here for nearly 4 years now. It's kind of self-serving here. Get this out of the way. I feel like I've been interviewing candidates for the last 4 years straight, and definitely have proof for that. So if you or anyone you know is interested in coming to work for a fantastic company, ResMed really is the place to be. It's a great culture, as you can see. The decor is fantastic, and we really have a lot of fun. We have beer. We don't have a kegerator. I have to work on that. My expense card manager. So Paul last week asked if I could put together a presentation real quick, and I thought about it. And one of the things that popped up in my head is we've been interviewing a lot, and that is about 1 out of 10 candidates that I asked this question. If I go, you're familiar with Apache Camel? About 1 out of 10 of them say, yeah, I've heard of it. They couldn't tell you much of what it meant. And about 1 out of 30 or so have actually done any work with Apache Camel. So that has led me to surmise, indisputable fact, is that if there's anybody out there who's working at a company that's using Apache Camel, they're happy enough they're not out looking for jobs. So I don't get to see them. Okay, so some of the source material that I pulled from for my slide today, I want to give the appropriate credit. Klaus Ibsen, who works for Red Hat. If you do any kind of research or look for questions in Camel, you're going to see a lot of stuff written by him. He has also written the book, the definitive book, Camel in Action. If you really want a good introduction to it, this is a book to read. If you have a Safari, Books Online account, it's in there. And then Christian Bosa, which I had a chance to meet a few months ago. He's very knowledgeable, very active in committing code to Camel. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, Alan Wong, right? I've been working with him for the last 4 months, and he's our dedicated architect from Red Hat, and the guy's brilliant. So if you have a chance to see him speak, definitely come back to that. Saw Christian speak at the Red Hat Summit a few months ago, back in Boston. Very smart guy. So we're going to go over what is Camel, what is Apache Camel. By show of hands, anybody who's heard of it? Okay. And show of hands who have actually used it. Okay, a couple of people. That table down there. I know.
Where are you guys from?
So yeah, it's true. We do use Camel here. Is anybody on CPAP therapy? No? So yeah, we have machines out there. We got millions of machines out there across the country, around the world. They're transmitting data to our systems here. That data goes in and gets processed. There's 100 different things that happen to that data, and that's all going through Apache Camel to make that happen. I'm going to just cover briefly about some of the benefits of deployment options, and we'll look at some examples and be interactive. So we can either make this as long as we want or as short as we want, whatever you guys feel. Okay. So the big question: what is Camel? There's your answer. Pretty much, yeah. No. If you've ever seen a presentation on Camel or anything related to it, they'll always show a picture of Camel. So from the Camel website, it's a powerful open source integration framework based on known enterprise integration patterns. So enterprise integration patterns is the key. In the open source world, as far as popularity of technologies that provide enterprise integration patterns. Camel is right up there. Another popular one is Spring integration. And so Spring integration is also about enterprise integration patterns. And Camel and Spring are very similar. But I don't, from talking to a lot of engineers in the field, Camels preferred over Spring integration. You see very few situations where Spring integration is used, but it doesn't mean that it's not usable. So it's not as popular, and it's not as robust. It's not as actively supported. So what is integration, right? So why do we need it? It is critical for your business to integrate. You work for companies, and whether you're a company right now or businesses in the past that you worked for, you know that you have disparate groups within the organization that are using different information systems or developing different technologies, and then some brilliant marketing guy comes along and says, hey, we want to make a product out of connecting this to this. And you oh man, that's like the worst idea in the world, but you got to do it. So you're integrating those systems, and one may communicate via XML messages, one may communicate via JSON messages, one may not have any communication means at all, it just spits out files to the file system. These are all integration challenges. And I just, again, show of hands, anybody encounter integration challenge? Hopefully you're thinking about that and go, wow, I know you use Camel, so maybe. It's true when it comes, not just within a single organization, but the companies go out and they buy other companies. And they come to you and say, hey, we just bought this company, they got this technology, we want it to work with our technology. Make it happen. And then you look at it and go, who the heck did the due diligence on this? There's stuff, we can't do that. So this really does help. Camel space really excels, and we only integrate different technologies, and we'll look at different ways it goes about achieving that. So why a framework? Well, the framework and the system that does all the heavy lifting for you. We'll talk a little bit more about that in features. But most importantly, instead of you having to worry about how to piece together all these different rules and policies in particular for integrated systems, one system to another, it's all there. The components for doing that are all within the Camel framework. It really simplifies that so you can focus on your business. But when it comes down to it, why do we really need integration? I mean, this is the question, right? It reminds me of this old adage, right? The customer's always right. About 20 years ago, I created these 13 rules of software engineering for myself, and I think number 2 was wrong. If the customer's always right, then we wouldn't need integration, right? Because the customer systems, their data would be stored in the format that we understood. They'd be able to interface with our systems without any having to transform data or transform the communication mechanism. It would all be perfect, and they would just work perfectly with what we've developed, because what we have developed is perfect. Expected some sort of chuckle out of that one. No. So, so that's just a general principle, right? You gotta, we're the magicians. We're the ones who they come to and say, hey, make this magic happen. Give us some sort of magic. In order to do that, we gotta have the right tools, and Camel has plenty of tools for doing it. All right, so when do you need it? When do you need Camel? It's really there when you have to integrate those disparate systems, right? Different protocols, different formats, different rules, different policies. What's a failure policy in this system is different from a failure policy in the system. You want rate track policy. You want to monitor what you're doing. That's a lot of extra work, and sometimes we don't do that up front because we're trying to get something to work, and then we have to come back and do it and spend years doing it. Maybe it's job security. Maybe you don't get a chance to catch your breath, so this platform is really good for that. We'll get into a little more details. So what is Integration Enterprise Patterns? Well, it's a book. Bobby Wolf and Hope, Greg Hope, so they wrote a book, and they explain about these enterprise integration patterns. So they went out and they surveyed, and they discovered very common sets of patterns. And so if you're going to do some sort of diagram of a workflow, you can utilize a particular pattern to say, this is what this does at this point in time. This is a pretty good book. You can actually get quite a few pieces of it off the internet. It's been freely published in that area. Plus, there's a whole ton of other information out there about it. But Camel, the idea of Camel is based on this. So is Spring Integration. So are things like a TIBCO Business Works, which I don't recommend. Don't be good for TIBCO. Use TIBCO. Yeah.
You like it?
We've I've talked to folks who've been companies. They spend their first $1 million for TIBCO. They think they're going to get everything in TIBCO. They go and say, hey, I need this. And to, oh, hey, okay, you got to spend another $1 million for this piece to do that, and so on and so forth. And in the end, So this, I expect you to really be able to see it 2.0. It's got a laser pointer.
Yes,
Okay. This is most of the enterprise integration patterns, and these are diagrams that you can use to represent what you're doing. If you use Visio, there's actually a Visio stencil to bring this in. And they're broken down endpoints. Endpoint could be inbound or outbound data with some sort of a protocol that bridges your workflow to another workflow. Then messaging, the information is passing through Camel. We call them messages. They could be in any format. Transformation of data, various channels. When I show you an example of this, we'll dig down a little more into detail. And really, what is Camel? So now we're looking at the sort of the high-level component parts of it. So this is an example of content-based router, and this is the objective here is to normalize data that's coming in. So let's say we have an endpoint here where we're receiving different types of messages. A single endpoint, but different message formats. So it could be something, a widget in XML, could be some other types of widgets in JSON. These are coming from suppliers or any kind of source. But when this component piece here, we say router, that's a short name for it, content-based router, a longer name. It's some logic in there that can look at that inbound data to figure out what it is. So your data might even have a MIME type attached to it. Let's say it's coming in from a web endpoint. And so that content-based router can determine the type of data it is and route it to other routes here. And you have these translators that are transforming the inbound data to a normalized data format and coming out this other way. So it's a real simple case. be accepting both XML and CSV type files. The HTTP endpoint is accepting only XML files. They get merged together into a queue. All right, this is the queues are one of the channel types. They get down to the content-based router, where one is a CSV and it gets transformed into a plain old Java object. And down here, we've got our XML translator translates it into a plain old Java object. It's a real easy way. So enterprise integration patterns, this gives us a really simple way of representing what the things that Camel will do for you in these integration technologies. Can you see okay? So when we talk about these patterns and the behavior and these workflows, we use plain language to describe it. So we can say, from new order, which would be this endpoint here, choose whether it's the inbound message in the widget, and we're going to send it to our widget, or if it's a gadget, we're going to send it to our gadget. Otherwise, it would be some sort of custom link where we send it down there. So we could use pseudocode, pseudo language to really explain these behaviors. And it translates into a fluent Java domain-specific language. So when we want to create a route, and that's what we're doing, routing information. We start with our from, which we say here from new order. And our new order is coming off of a queue. That's our endpoint is a queue. We do our choice. We say when. We use the XPath query in there. And so we detect that this is a widget. We're going to send it to this widget queue or send it to that queue, whatever. It's a simple fluent language of Java DSL. So we're just slowly building up to what Camel is doing. We're going to work the other way. Another very common DSL pattern for Camel is to use XML. This is where I want to pose the question. If you have a choice, raise your hand if you'd rather use Java-based DSL over an XML-based DSL. Raise your hand there. And I would assume everybody else is okay with using XML. It seems to be a big fight within the industry over the last few years. It's so getting away from these declarative type languages. So, but still, there's a lot of value in the XML-based DSL for Camel. When we get into some examples later on, we'll take a look at that. But yeah, the language is still the same. You're from, you get your choice, you get your when rules here, you get your alternative rules there. And it's pretty legible, right? It's better with syntax type. Okay, so just real quickly, I want to break over and show you about just show you a list of components. Just as an aside, things like these endpoints, this active queue here, that's a component that talks to a queue. And there are about 130 components now, endpoint components. See that? Okay, great. So they're nice and alphabetically listed. Somebody throw out a endpoint, some sort of communication. FTP. Doing SFTP? Gonna make it really hard. Okay. There we go. There's an SFTP function. And we have another one. How about anybody know what SMPP is? Yeah, it's what the air carriers use at the very low level to send SMS messages from one device to another. Well, anyway, so Dropbox. Okay, let's see if we got Dropbox. Oh, it's there? Okay. So never mind. How about Twitter? Hey, there's Twitter. So pretty much if you have some communication protocol that you need to talk to, Camel's going to have a component to do it.
SNMP.
SNMP? Solar? Yeah. Actually, to search for things.
Yeah, so,
Was that?
so,
So, yes, there's quite a few different soap components. In fact, sorry, let's try web services. Okay. CXF. All right. If you're familiar with CXF, PayPal. I don't know if there's a PayPal. I've never seen it. No, no PayPal. Actually, as in Apache? Yeah, CXF. So yeah, if you're talking about JAX-RS or JAX-WS standard, the CXF components are the preferred components for doing that. We do that quite extensively using CXF and Camel and exposing JAX-RS based services. Dozer? Oh yeah, there's one more here. There's Dozer. And then, let's see here. The other is, so components is one thing, that's the endpoints. That's being able to integrate and talk to the various systems. The other is understanding the enterprise integration patterns, translating those conceptual patterns like the content-based router into the Camel side of that component. So when we looked at the message router, we can take a look at here, and then it's going to give us, you guys can read it. It's going to describe how that particular pattern is implemented and the different rule sets. So when you look here in our predicate for a choice, that's a simple XPath. But predicates could be very expansive, very complex rule predicates, multiple languages. Camel supports about 24 different languages, from a simple EL-based language to Groovy or Ruby or whatever you want to do. The simple language is pretty extensive, usually meets a lot of folks' needs. But you definitely want to start from understanding those patterns, enterprise patterns, and help and use those to map to what your needs are. Okay. The meters just get hungry. They turn the AC off because nobody's here. Okay, so just to summarize it here, we talked about being an integration framework, talked about the enterprise integration patterns. I briefly touched upon routing. In the examples later, you got to get sort of a better understanding of what is meant by routing, but it's just synonymous with workflow. You got a message coming into a route, it does stuff, gets spit out the route. It could be spit out in different places simultaneously. It could be thrown right into another, bridged over to another route, and so on and so forth. You got your endpoints are configured as URIs. I'll also show you that when I go back up here. This is an endpoint, and it's a producer, right? So it's producing a message for a route. Okay, so it's a URI pattern. So you got your protocol, you've got some sort of a subsystem, and then what part of that subsystem. But these URIs will vary by component. If it's a HTTP RESTful endpoint, then you're going to see an HTTP host name, port pattern type deal. And this component here is also an endpoint, and this is what is it? That was a producer, and this is a consumer. So it's saying that you go ahead and consume that. Sometimes the thinking's a little inverted. So don't try to think about it in the sense of like a JMSQ producer, consumer. Here, producers producing data for the route, consumers taking data away from the route.
Question. For this like hard configured or can you self-scribe and self-scribe this kind of message coming, publish this kind and publishing this kind of protocol format? Can you do that?
Yeah, so the question is are the endpoints hard configured that you have to bind into them? You can, the answer is to some extent they are. To some extent you are saying I'm binding to this very specific endpoint. And that's important in some communication protocols. There are some protocols that there's like a load balancing protocol, which will actually allow you to bind to multiple endpoints or dynamically bind to an endpoint. So that's one way of doing that. But as far as having to hard code these values into so you don't want a hard code configuration, whether in a Java DSL like this or even in XML. So you can parameterize that and externalize those parameters. So things like the names of queues, those would, for the most part, be a known value. But where that queue is located, how to connect, the connection details of the queue, you would have that parameterized, and you can parameterize it externally from this. Were there any other questions?
In practice, how many different languages are you using?
How many different languages are?
Like in practice, how many different languages are you using for this system?
So in practice, if you could simply stick to using the Java DSL and do everything in Java, or you could have a mix of Java providing some custom endpoints and describe it in XML.
Yeah, actually, not so much about the endpoints, but in practice, using Camel in general, it almost opens you up to have a much more heterogeneous environment, which almost kind of promotes that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in practice, yeah. The question is, and I repeat the question for the camera. Question is, are you agnostic, right? Are you platform agnostic? If you've got this platform that's developed in C#, and this platform that's developed in Java, and this one that's developed in Node.js, all that's irrelevant. If you've got an instance of Camel, and you want to integrate those two together. Camel runs on Java.
Yeah, that part.
Yeah.
Like with ResMed, we use this for integration of all your legacy systems with your customers and everything.
Yes.
It almost kind of opens up where every engineer can kind of go off in one direction with it. It's like, oh, I want to develop in Python today, and I want to do Java, and I want to do C#. I mean, is that kind of control thing that you're starting to be a much more heterogeneous environment than before, or are you?
Yeah, it supports that.
I know it supports that.
But I'd say the rest of your answer to your question is definitely policy. Like to keep the developers in line. There was an interesting discussion at the Red Hat Summit about that, and especially around Docker, and especially about using Docker as a microservice container. And you can have these developers writing stuff in Node, and these developers writing in Python, and yes, if you're the manager who's got to maintain the resources to maintain all these products, it's probably not the best choice.
Yeah, it's not like you can right,
hey, we develop in Java only here, no mixed languages. Marketing doesn't know or care about that, and they're the one they go out and go, we need to acquire this company over here, and they've got a significant development suite on PHP, and it's very easy to happen. And so you don't want to then have your developers have to learn PHP in order to get the systems working together. That shouldn't be necessary. You get the endpoints over here in PHP, the endpoints over here in Java, and you use integration technology to bring the systems together, or to provide the services to your end users, your customers. And that's really, I think from an internal perspective, and a homogeneous perspective, you at least want the resources to be working within the same languages and the same constraints to make it easier to maintain. Okay. So yeah, payload, container, so no container dependency. That's really, we're talking about being cross-platform, but when it comes to Camel, doesn't have to run in a specific container. It doesn't have to be deployed in a more capable container. It doesn't have to be deployed in Spring Boot only or OSGI, crap container, and stuff. Camel already has, I'll talk a little bit about some of the deployment technologies that are already in place, but it's very simple to bootstrap Camel into any server type container you have that may not already be supported. And of course, a lot of components. Were there any surprises in there of components that it had that you guys really didn't expect? Did I phrase that question correctly? Is anybody surprised at the amount of integration of components that it had? A little bit of surprise, yeah, she's surprised. Come on.
Who's writing these components?
In the next section, I have a little bit on open source about Camel. So the open source community, the Apache community, open source community. Now, the biggest contributors, of course, to Camel are Red Hat. Paid professional engineers being paid by Red Hat to do that. So Red Hat has invested it made huge investment in Camel in the form of JBoss Fuse. So JBoss Fuse is a platform, an OSGI-based platform that has very prominent Camel. It's a platform for running Camel applications. And since Red Hat acquired Fuse 2 years ago, their adoption and customer adoption has been astronomical. And this past June, in the Red Hat Summit, almost everything that they talked about was around Fuse, was around the Camel. They won't say Camel, they say Fuse. That's what they want to call it. But it was around Fuse, around using Docker to bootstrap Fuse to run Camel, to do all these integrations, microservices, that kind of stuff. But it was really There's a good question. Is Fuse strictly OSGI? And so up to this point, yes, it's Fuse runs on Apache Camel. But as I said, Red Hat uses the term Fuse to represent their Camel product. So they are just about to release in October. They're going to release what they call Fuse on EAP. Which to me is very confusing, because Fuse was really just about the craft. Fuse on EAP is basically Camel running on EAP. So that's, now, we can run Camel on EAP if we do that. I'll talk about how that's done. But if you're an organization and you want commercial support for this technology, Red Hat is definitely the vendor to go to. I'm not a special pleader for that, but.
Are you using Fuse or using Pure Camel?
We use fuse, and we also use the Camel spring integration, which I don't know what the secret sauce is. Their fuse on EAP. It's probably just the Camel spring. It's probably not because they have to think about CDI and all other JED technologies. That's the one thing about Camel is that a lot of the components, like the JMS components, the transaction components, are actually based on spring components. So some of that, the development in Camel space is really based on the pace of those corresponding spring components, which was a problem if you were using JMS. You were stuck with JMS spec 1.1 if you were using Camel up until recently. But Red has gone through a lot of effort to refactor and create replacement components that aren't dependent on the spring. But this is something to be aware of. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just something that you're looking broadly. If you're using spring technologies, it's great. If you're not using spring technologies, and it's a little trickier.
Do you have demo for the Apache Camel?
Demo of Camel.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you some real source code, some real projects. I'm not going to run anything just because it's just console based, nothing flashy.
But the concept, I mean, not the concept itself, but the Apache Camel is new to me.
Okay.
Based on your block diagram, as far as I understand, there are different endpoints, and maybe some of them coming from the file system, some of them coming from the
Yes.
HTTP, HTTPS. And eventually, I remember there was a routing accordingly how the data will be processed. And later on, we were doing some sort of final integration, maybe filtering some of the wanted data and dumping it somewhere, I don't know. So
Yes.
is it like the ETL process, or I mean, what's really going on? Why do I want it? I know the integration part, but I'd like to understand what value Camel is bringing.
Those are very good questions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about benefits here in the next segment. But the question is, what values Camel bring to you? And I'm going to give some examples. ETL is an example of what Camel can do. There's a commercial product called Talon that is actually built on Camel, but it's an ETL tool. And there's there's a million different things that you can do with it. So you have to decide, is this appropriate for what my need is, for the problem that I'm trying to solve? And I think we're going to help with some of those questions. If I don't, then ask me again, see if I have a different answer. Features, we talked about EIP. The simplicity of the domain-specific language to write your flows or your routes. Again, it's fluent, something that's very easy to communicate. And also, diagram. Large collection of adapters, very strong unit tests and integration test framework. So if your development team is a test-driven development or behavior-driven development organization, very strong that way, Camel does have some great testing tools around that, where it can bootstrap entire context for testing your environment, doing unit tests, integration tests, system level tests from an automated perspective. I talked about the various expression languages. There's about 24 different languages that are just supported out of the box. So if I'm very familiar with, I'm more familiar with Groovy than I am comfortable with EL, simple EL. But I'm using Groovy because I need the extra logic that it has. It's very easy for me to do. Data formats. Boy, that's like a real endless array of possibilities there. So you think about all the different files, like Excel files and CSV and Word documents, PDF documents, various binary file formats, hundreds, thousands of binary file formats, including PDF. And then your hierarchical type formats, XML, even standard XML, and JSON. There is a component that can read and parse any of those that's already pluggable into Camel. So now, of course, if it's not, if it's a more proprietary file format, it's very easy to create a component that you can plug into Camel that's going to read it, transform it into your POJOs, or transform it into your business logic, which is really where the process begins. And then, so, and I'm not a special pleader for Red Hat, but the JBoss Developer Studio, which is built on Eclipse, has their new studio that they came out that corresponds to their Fuse 6.2 release and their EAP 6.4 release is fantastic. They have excellent tooling, full, complete integration with the JBoss server, and allow you to take those integration patterns that we saw in the diagrams and you can it will allow you to do graphical EIP planning and have full error score for all the different types of configuration. That stuff ties automatically into Git, ties all the stuff automatically into Docker and Fabricate and a whole bunch of things. They've got really a phenomenal suite of tools. If anybody's interested. If you are, just mention my name, get 10% discount. Camel's 100% open source. That's very important. We spend a lot of time. Sometimes we're scratching our heads at something and we go and look at the source code and there's a bug. And it's usually we're a few versions behind, so oh, they fixed the bug. Yeah, it's a very active community. That's also big in the decision process, especially if you're a manager or director or something. You want to make sure that you're using technology, especially one as extensive as this, that is supported by either a large community or a commercial organization, JBoss. But in this case, it's both Red Hat, and a whole bunch of developers who are out there answering questions and fixing things. So it is very well supported. You're not going to be left hanging in the wind, trying to think of some other technologies and just go and stop.
When you say it's well supported, how easy is it to get some enhancements into the
If you're just doing community, right, and you will get turnaround on answers, immediately, whatever you think is a reasonable amount of time. If it's 24 hours, you will get plenty of answers.
Code into the system. How difficult?
I'm sorry.
How difficult is it to push for enhancement of features?
Oh, okay.
Are they receptive, or is it just?
Yeah. So how difficult is it to get additional features in? So I think there's there's different answers to that question. One is just going back to the Red Hat side. Red Hat puts a lot of priorities into customer needs. So if they have customers that are asking for features, Red Hat engineers will prioritize them. And what Red Hat does is everything that they add into their supported version, they push right back out into the community. Now on the community side, there are a lot of non-paid developers who are working on. The majority of them are at Red Hat. There's still a lot of around the world that are pushing changes into Camel, and they seem to be very responsive. And I watch them. I'm just trying to think, looking at the feature requests and how they dock them out on various releases. You go see major releases from them, from the community side, about every 2 months or 3 months. And they're going to be added hundreds or satisfy hundreds of feature requests. People say, oh, I wish this component had this configuration value, and those things get thrown in. If you really want it, it's open source. You can go in and do it yourself.
Well, in the large organization, you don't want to carry that code with for 3 or 4 years or something, especially it's cool.
Yeah, well, it depends on how extensive is. It's also a matter of scale. Is it a real simple feature? Is it a more complex feature? Is it something only one person is interested or a bunch of people are interested in? There is a lot of community negotiation that goes on in this, and that's why it's still very vibrant. And it's going to, and I really predict that this space is growing. This technology is going to be adopted at a much higher rate in the coming years. People become more and more familiar with it, particularly as Red Hat has invested a lot of time into this technology, and they believe from their customers and their customer adoption rates that this is a good investment for them as a company. So it indicates to me that there's going to be a lot of support for this. Yes, please.
Okay. So let's go ahead and take 10 minutes, use some restrooms, have some more pizza or soda.